Welcome back to the Superhumanize Podcast. I'm Ariana Summer, your host. Today, we step into the radiant realm of healing where ancient light meets modern science. My guest is Forrest Smith, a visionary at the intersection of wellness innovation and technology. As the founder of Kineon Labs and a former extreme athlete, Forrest brings decades of insight, both as a high-performing human and as a pioneering entrepreneur. His journey spans continents, from the rugby fields of South China to the tech corridors of North America. Along the way, he has built and sold multiple companies, delved deep into Chinese medicine and philosophy, and emerged with a powerful mission to make cutting-edge red light therapy accessible, effective, and rooted in science. In this conversation, we explore what makes red light such a potent ally for recovery, inflammation, performance, and even emotional well-being. We discuss photobiomodulation, how light interacts with our tissues at the molecular level, and why precise dosing truly matters. We also touch on the exciting future of light therapy for brain health, mood support, and energy optimization. Whether you're curious about pain management without pharmaceuticals, or you're interested in how light can nourish and heal the body, this episode will light the path.
Superhumanize. Accelerated evolution.
Forrest, welcome to the Superhumanize Podcast. Good to be with you.
Likewise, thank you for the awesome hospitality. I can't wait. It's going to be an awesome discussion today.
Yes, absolutely. And something that really resonated with me when I learned more about you when I was preparing for this conversation. Like myself, you have lived on multiple continents and you moved from quite different worlds into where you're at now. You moved from the world of sports, extreme sports, into what's the intersection of wellness, innovation, biotechnology. Could you begin by sharing a little glimpse, a little overview of your journey and what drew you to healing and light and building the company?
That's an awesome question. I think actually it starts with I got lucky and started studying Chinese at an early age. So when I was 13 or 14. So I speak and read and write fluent Chinese. And I moved to China to live when I was 20. And I lived there for almost 20 years and building technology companies that kind of do with a supply chain out of China what you shouldn't be able to do with a supply chain out of China. So more technical and high-end lasers and things like this. And I've been building kind of my entire adult life companies that were meant to be able to impact the world in a positive, systemic way. And I build those, and then they've gotten progressively larger over the decades. But when we exited the last one, I really wanted to do something that was more mission-driven versus just building a company for an exit. And that's how I met my business partner, was through China. Both of us had lived in Guangzhou at some point. And we connected about the idea that the mission shouldn't be necessarily just to exit. It really should be to make a systemic impact. And so what we came to hold ourselves accountable for that, because you have to have something measurable as a mission, was to improve the quality of life for the largest number of people we can in the most substantial and measurable way we can. And that's how we came to start a light and laser therapy device company. When we started at Kineon, there was really only clinical devices out there that were really effective. And it's still that way. There's so many different panels and things like this, but they're just not, and I don't like to knock other people's products, but they're still Gen 1 products. They're not really focused or dosing your internal tissue as effectively as they can. And so that's what we took on, is how do we get $50,000 out of the clinics, out of the laboratories, and onto people? Because the technology is actually much more effective than anything that we have from a pharmaceutical standpoint for pain relief. And it also doesn't have the downsides for stomach and liver and cardiovascular tissue and addiction and all of these type of things. So that's where we spent our first few years of the company, is really going deep into the weeds of how light therapy works. How do we deliver the right level of photons to the right level of tissue to be able to trigger the best outcomes that allow people an alternative to having to take pharmaceuticals that they really don't want to take in the first place?
100%, Forrest. I couldn't agree more with you. And it's amazing that we now live in a time where we have access to alternative And let's begin with some clarity. I am certain that many listeners are curious about the foundations. What exactly is red light therapy and how does it differ from other modalities, let's say infrared saunas or full spectrum light?
So we use the term from a medical research community. I say we in a broader sense, not necessarily just our company, but the broader research community in the space use the term photobiomodulation because it has expanded out just from red light to including near infrared as well. And so we use two wavelengths for our soft tissue product, the Move Plus, which I have here on my desk because I use it every morning.
And I
And
have
in,
it. We're so gracious to send me one. And it is, I'm not getting paid for saying this, it's an excellent device. But
thank you so much.
yeah,
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about how you're using it. I think we've been sharing more and we work with a number of different laboratories around the world to develop really cool protocols. And I'd love to share some with you today because there's some new ones that we're getting out there that are just so exciting. But yeah, the Move Plus, our target was to get it sub $500, take clinical level lasers and make them wearable instead of a plug-in thing for the wall that you have to go to the clinic for. Let's make them wearable. But the red light therapy, to answer your question, essentially the medical research term has moved more towards photobiomodulation. Photo light, bio, like our physiology, and modulation changes. So how are we using light to change our bodies? And there are 8 or 9 different photoacceptors in your body, depending on how you count it. You can't have 2 academics in a room and get them to agree on anything, but 8 or 9 different photoacceptors. And those exist in different volumes and at different depths of tissue. And so what we do as a company is we spend time mapping where we're delivering these photons and building mathematical models and then testing those with our devices from a dosing standpoint. Because what really drives the outcomes for red light therapy is, are you triggering these photoacceptors as optimally as possible? And so we spend tens of thousands of hours with our team. Our head of research is a photonics guy who will be in a PhD program next year. Our CTO is a particle physicist. We spend a lot of time deep in the weeds of how to map this out and deliver the right level of photons to the right level of tissue. The reason we do that, though, is your body responds to light. All of these different photoacceptors respond to light on what's known as a biphasic dose curve, which is essentially just a curve that goes up and then back down, a wave-looking curve. And the interpretation of that is, if you increase the number of photons or the dosing that goes to this photoacceptor, you get better and better outcomes until you hit the peak of that. And then after you hit the optimal peak, when you continue to add additional energy in from an optical system, it just goes back down. And so it's very important. The dosing level of the photons delivered to these photoacceptors is really the key driver for the outcomes. And again, our mission is to deliver outcomes. It's not to sell products. And that's really the heart of our technology. And what we've built is, how do we deliver the best outcomes by modeling the most effective use of photons in the tissue?
excellent, Forrest. And what I want to go into the dosing aspect in just a minute, because that is truly fascinating, to bring the science back into the body, so the audience can also imagine. Photobiomodulation at its heart is about light speaking to cells, right? And to change things in our biology. By doing so, why is this such a powerful force in terms of healing or inflammation?
Yeah, essentially because there's a number of different, so again, I identified that we've got 8 or 9 different photoacceptors. There's a few of these that are extracellular. So you have some that are in the blood. So hemoglobin is a carrier molecule and that's in the blood and is delivering what we used to think of as just oxygen and carbon dioxide, our 2-gas system. But there's been a big paradigm shift from the medical literature and medical research standpoint that really has shifted us to being a 3-gas system: oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nitric oxide. It's a great example because it's very clear that when we hit that hemoglobin with 808 nanometer near infrared light, the nitric oxide breaks off. And there's 4 binding sites. They don't necessarily all break off. It depends on how it's dosed. But essentially, those binding sites for carrying nitric oxide are competitive with oxygen. And when you dump nitric oxide into the blood, it's a dilation factor. So there's 2 big things that happen from this impact. One is your blood vessels open up and you start to deliver blood more effectively to the area that you're treating. The second thing is those hemoglobin molecules are now binding in more oxygen. So not only are you delivering more blood, that blood is more oxygen rich, and you can actually increase the level of energy that you can track from an aerobic creation standpoint. And so that's one of the, we'll call it 8 different photoacceptors in the body. So that one's delivering more blood, more energy to the area. Another one that actually goes more directly towards oxidative stress or speaks more directly to oxidative stress and inflammation is an enzyme that's in your mitochondria in the electron transport chain. So your mitochondria are the big powerhouses of your cells. They generate, instead of generating electricity, they generate ATP as a powerhouse. That's the currency of energy for our bodies. What we've found from photobiomodulation or light therapy is that there are bottlenecks in that factory creation process. And one of these is in the 3rd and 4th steps of the 4-step process in the electron transport chain. And this enzyme, cytochrome C oxidase, is one of the key bottlenecks for everyone to produce energy. So when we're able to target this effectively, again, this is both red and infrared that target this enzyme. These photons donate electrons into that same energy generation process, and remove the bottleneck. And so what we see for that, the outcome for that from the energy generation standpoint, is roughly a 70 to 80% increase. It depends on the individual, but for an order of magnitude, I think it's a good indicator over 7 to 8 hours. And so 70 to 80% increase in the amount of energy you generate, there's a huge number of downstream impacts from that. One of them is your mitochondria signal vary a lot with your nucleus in your cells. It's called mitochondrial retrograde signaling. And in a lot of these signaling pathways, there is an impact on oxidative stress. And so oxidative stress, we can think about a general environmental stress, because the environmental stress actually causes oxidative stress in your cells. So if you're exposed to X-rays, radiation, or EMF, or microplastics, a lot of these different things that you find in the environment now that are impacting people negatively, it will increase the oxidative stress load on your cells. So when you can use the light therapy to modulate that down back into a healthy range, the impacts are enormous. And to the degree that, just to give an example of what that looks like, oftentimes, and there's ongoing tests around this, but oftentimes when you have a blockage like a stroke or like a heart attack, the tissue that's downstream from that is not getting oxygen and puts in a huge level of oxidative stress on that cell. What we've found from the research now, and they're actually implementing this for kind of hospital level protocols as well, is if I'm having a stroke, but I use infrared to treat the brain cells that are downstream from this, they don't die for a 24-hour period. We reduce the oxidative stress there so that they're still under stress, but it's managed back down to a manageable level where you don't have as much cell apoptosis, which is essentially just cell death. And so it's just a great indicator of how impactful this is from a treatment standpoint relative to those oxidative stress and then further downstream inflammation markers as well.
Truly, Forrest, and what you just described, that's just this one example. It is not only life-changing for somebody who has dealt with a stroke, but it can be life-saving. And it can make
100%. It's so exciting.
it is really amazing. And so I've always been fascinated by light from so many different perspectives. And we'll do a little bit of a dive into that a little later in this conversation. But for now, something that really struck me when I was looking at Kineon and the product you designed is that you designed backward from a biological outcome to the device modeling. Can you walk us through that process and why it matters for healing?
Yes, absolutely. Hopefully I can give you a small anecdote about it as well, because we started off with our dosing models being built just like everyone else was. We looked at the medical literature and said, hey, this is what everyone's doing. But when we were releasing our first product, actually about 6 months short of it, we had a version of this. We had 3 modules for the product, and we were testing if in the literature, what you'd like to see is the optical power density. And there's a couple of other metrics around these optical metrics for this. But essentially what most of the studies were tracking was the power output from the system and the power input to the physiology. And we had different versions of our device made with, right now, our current version has 10 lasers per module, so 30 total. At the time, we were making with the same level of power output with just 1 laser per module. And according to how this has been researched, we should have seen very similar outcomes. And when we started testing this with our beta users, what we found was that the 10 lasers per module was, even though it's the same level of power, it's just split, were wildly more effective than this single laser. And that had us scratching our heads a little bit. And that's where we started taking a deviation from the standard path and saying, let's go back to first principles. Let's understand what we're targeting. Let's understand how we're delivering. And then how do we build a model to be able to correctly interpret the laser going into the system and correctly project or predict how much we're actually providing and what we should see from our photoacceptors from a response standpoint. And so that started us down again, the tens of thousands of hours going in. The one thing that I think is also probably worth noting about that is we build these models and then we go test them. We don't want them to be something that's just stuck in an ivory tower and it's, oh, this is a great model and it says we should be right. So we find things like nitric oxide. So we've done testing with, I mentioned nitric oxide breaks off from the hemoglobin. So we know how much hemoglobin is there. We know in our model, we're expecting this much, but in the testing, we're only seeing this much. So we've gone through almost 40 cycles now of model it, build it, test it, judge it, close the gap. And that's really a lot of what our technical and medical teams do, is understanding what those photoacceptors and their downstream triggers are that we can measure, and being able to measure those and build it back into our design.
And something else that ties into the what do you call it? The depth of the work you're doing there is also what you mentioned before, the dosing. You've also spoken before about overdosing with red light, not as a danger, but more, if I understood it correctly, as a loss of efficiency. What does that look like? And tell us more about the dosing aspect with regard to your precision dosing model.
Absolutely. I think this is, again, so hopefully I'm not nerding out for you too much because I get very excited about this. This is the heart of our technology and where we spend a lot of time with dosing. One of the things that we've seen is people building, and we actually originally planned to build LED-based systems only because they're simpler systems to engineer and they're simpler to get through regulatory. What we found was that if you're building LED-only systems, even if you're controlling the angle of emission down, you can't get the collimation. So you can't get the penetration that you get out of a laser. So collimation essentially is, instead of emitting and it continues to get broader, like an LED or like a lamp, with the laser, it doesn't get broader. It's collimated, or like a cylinder that you can actually penetrate further into the tissue. What we see with the LED only based systems is that you can turn them up enough to be able to penetrate through to the internal tissue. But if you do that, then anything that's more superficial from the tissue side, so your skin and your fat tissue and everything else that it touches before it hits that one point, is overdosed. So you come up that curve and then you go down the backside of it. And so you get suboptimal dosing one way or the other. And so that's essentially what we've tried to do and have succeeded relatively well with our devices, is how do we build this in a way that optimally doses every single bit of tissue that we interact with. And it's two things are hard to do, I think, that are a flag from a product standpoint. One is if you have emission that's not at the skin level. So if you're emitting a light and you're in front of a panel or something like this, 2 inches forward or 2 inches back makes a huge difference in the dosing. So if you're looking for something from a dosing standpoint, you want to be able to have it be reliable so you can get the same outcomes each time. So that means essentially emitting at skin level and making sure that you have lasers involved in it, because that's allowing you to penetrate through and provide better dosing to the internal tissue versus just the superficial tissue.
That makes a lot of sense for us, even to a layperson like me. And I am sure this is even way more complex. So thank you for putting it into terms where my brain can grasp it. Let's talk results now. What are some of the most exciting or perhaps even surprising outcomes you've seen from the Move Plus, and whether it's in terms of pain relief, mobility, or even mental well-being?
So all of those are super exciting. And I think we work with a spectrum of different types of users and patients. On one end, it's super exciting because we're dealing with NFL and NBA and high performance special forces guys who need to treat tissue to get back into doing insanely intense work physiologically. So that's super cool because you get to interact with them and see the outcomes that they see. And for those type of guys, the U.S. Olympic weightlifting team, as an example, a lot of what we see with these different types of high performance athletes is that for them, the biggest thing is the faster recovery and the reduced pain from repetitive stress. So if you have Achilles tendonitis, if you have plantar fasciitis, if you have patellar tendonitis, if you've got osteoarthritis in the knees from an old injury, all of these are really within our wheelhouse. Or another one that's a really good one is NBA guys sprain their ankle a lot. And either you're out for a couple of weeks and you're icing it, or you can get back in a low number of days by using laser therapy. You reduce the edema and the pain and inflammation and everything really powerfully there. So that's the one end of the spectrum. For me, the more exciting thing is, again, one of the things that we started the company around is trying to impact people's quality of life. And we've got something like 50 to 60,000 devices out there in the wild now, as it were. And every day we get in a message from someone, some kind of testimonial about really our older users, the most impactful ones, where you see, I had osteoarthritis. I had stopped. I hadn't even noticed, but I'd stopped walking. I was having a hard time getting up and down the stairs. They're really on this kind of downward spiral or trajectory. And then if you can just remove that inflammation and pain, you see them start getting back out into movement. They're starting to go do long walks and start swimming again and do training and things like this. And it's just, that's the most exciting thing to me, is seeing actual lifespan added to people's lives.
And that is beautiful. And let's dive a little bit deeper, just as one example with osteoarthritis. Let's say somebody uses your device and gets much better. It probably also depends on the person. What is the actual state of the dysfunction and the level of it? And let's say they use it and they feel so much better and they start doing all the things that they weren't able to do anymore for a while. If they stop using your device, would it be a sustainable healing for quite a while until it sets in again? Or would they need to use it constantly just to understand better?
You can maintain it you'd like to continue using it, but you can also remove the level of use you have to do. As an example, I've got an old torn meniscus from competitive sports when I was younger, and some torn muscles in my back that flare up again occasionally because I have not accepted that I'm middle-aged and I'm still CrossFit and playing rugby and silly things like this. So these flare up, they get swollen. I use this once or twice a day for 15 minutes. And you see that come back down. And as a lower back thing, it used to be that I would injure my lower back doing heavy deadlifts or something like this. And I'd be out for 2 months trying to work my way back in. And it's just uncomfortable. Your lower back, you can't sleep well. It's just in the middle of everything you do. Now it's less than a week. I'm back in, not back up to 100%, but I'm back in moving much faster because that tissue is just more healthy. But what I should be doing long-term is going from every day, using it for 15 to 30 minutes, to roughly just 2 to 3 times a week, 5 to 10 minutes, just as a maintenance program. Because what we see with that traumatic tissue damage is that doesn't, even after you've rehabbed it, there's great literature about this from the NFL that we've seen contributed devices for a study there. But one of the things that we notice from the NFL studies is when people have torn their ACL, they've gone back in, they've played more years in the NFL, they're retired. We're looking at kind of players. There was a 3,500 player study with Harvard that really flagged this in the first place. And the players who'd had ACL injuries and then repair and then continued on, they thought this is fine. I've gone through rehab. I've played more years in the NFL at like the highest level of competition I can. My knee is okay. What they found actually happened was both local issues. So that increased inflammation in the knee caused an earlier onset of osteoarthritis for them in 99% of the cases. But it wasn't just limited to the local tissue. You also saw an impairment for cardiovascular delivery in the entire leg. So you put these guys on an infrared camera and you can see the colder tissue. So 1 to 2 degrees colder on the leg that was injured, even after it's been rehabbed. And then the most kind of telling piece of this from the cardiovascular standpoint was, so we talked about local, regional, they also had 50% increase in, after washing out all confounding issues or anything like this, maybe it's all alignment or whatever, after all of the washouts, 50% increase in severe cardiovascular disease. And the reason after you peel back the layers on this is that inflammation from the traumatic tissue damage to the knee doesn't stay local. It goes throughout your system. And after decades of this, there's a really negative impact and makes your cardiovascular tissue much stiffer. And it was very clear from the data that this was essentially from that injury, that traumatic tissue damage they had just to a joint. So being able to treat that, what we found was you can actually, with that regional as an example, we treat the quad where we measured 1 to 2 degrees colder, 5 weeks of treatment, you're completely back into delivering blood effectively there. With the local tissue, in most cases, they'd been so degraded that they were very thin cartilage. But what's interesting is when you have inflammation in that synovial capsule in your knee, you put your normal kind of homeostasis out of whack. So your normal homeostasis is we're generating new cartilage and we're degrading the old one, and it's balanced. When you have more inflammation there, you're degrading it way faster and you're generating it way slower. And that's what causes that long-term osteoarthritis and the thinning of the soft tissue there. That actually reverses. You can reduce the inflammation and increase the chondroblast and type 2 collagen proliferation in the knee so that you actually push that back up above what you'd like to be seeing from a soft tissue generation standpoint. So there's really powerful impacts for it. It's just, it's unfortunate that most, even with the physiologists that we worked with, the professional sports teams, most of them are unaware of this until we can start bringing them the research. And it's nice to see the education getting there, but it's unfortunate because most of these guys were just popping pills before they found this out.
Yes, and pop pills for years, if not decades, while this inflammation becomes systemic and affects so many different systems as well. But that being said, obviously it makes a lot of sense when you have an injury during the healing process to work with, let's say, the Move Plus. But let's say you were not so fortunate to have access to it or know about this type of healing modality, and now you're already decades in. You've had this injury, you think you're fine. For somebody who already has been affected by this, not only locally, but non-locally, by the inflammation that also travels, what are some of the things you may have seen if you've worked with individuals like that at a later stage of this injury? What are some of the things that you have seen with regard to healing with these individuals who didn't right away, but maybe many decades later got the opportunity to actually work with one of you, with your device?
100%. It's a great question. And it's a really exciting time to be alive. Not only do we have these new laser therapy devices that actually really offer an alternative to traditional pharmaceuticals from a pain and inflammation standpoint, they also stack effectively with, and we work with a number of different clinics for stem cells and PRP and shockwave therapy are 3 things that stack very effectively with photobiomodulation. So if you can do any of those on top of the laser with it, the stem cells, so mesenchymal stem cells, proliferate at a higher rate. They also self-select into the front end high growth soft tissue cells like chondroblasts at a much higher rate. The same thing we see with PRP, people really starting to grow new tissue where there's nothing else out there that's going to really do that. There's no pill that you can take and magically regrow your cartilage. But what you can do is work with these regenerative medicine clinics to be able to add in what they're doing is already amazing. Let's just take that and turn it up to 11 by adding the lasers on top of it. So we work with a number of different clinicians. We've got we call it the Pain to Possible program, where we work with, I think, 500 to 600 different clinicians of different types. So everyone from orthopedic surgeons, naturopaths, functional medicine doctors, you name it. Really, it's been mostly, a lot of it's also come from people who are, a lot of the interests has come from people who are, I think, come from a background in a more traditional approach, but see the limitations of that approach and looking and researching into things that are more regenerative, more sustainable, and less pharmaceutical and less nasty byproducts from a physiological standpoint. And it's just great to see. It's super exciting to be alive. Our parents didn't have this option. It's just something that wasn't available. And we're just right in the middle of this great renaissance of technology being applied in a way where it's not doom scrolling, or it's not blue light or EMF or all of these different kind of environmental microplastics. It's something that actually add benefit to our lives if we can get the education out there and help people get into it more.
Agreed, Forrest. And to add on to that, it's so amazing to be alive because we have access to these incredible technologies, and we also have access to some ancient knowledge that was either gate capped or was just not available for regular people. I'm a big fan of traditional Chinese medicine, tonic herbs, and a lot of the herbs that I take, even 100, 120, 150 years ago, would have been reserved for the Chinese imperial court. And there's no way you could even access them. And to be able to combine from both of these worlds that walk hand in hand, I think that's
It's such a great approach. I love it. I spent almost 20 years in China, and that was one of my favorite things was the soft tissue approaches out of traditional Chinese medicine for acupressure, acupuncture, and for what they use from an herbal standpoint are all amazing. They just haven't had the money and the funding to go from a research and a trial standpoint. So they're underutilized or undereducated, I think, for most people.
yes. And I've been taking tonic herbs for between 15 to 20 years from now, and I credit
wow.
them with so much. That's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down to. But with regard to your device, with regard to the Move Plus, what you just said about combining this with, for example, stem cells, I'm a big fan. I haven't done stem cell therapy yet, but I have had systemic exosomes by my choice quite a few times, and I haven't tried them topically yet, but I'm fascinated by that. I see the before and afters, and they're incredible, whether it's skin or hair, even better than PRP. But so how do you stack this, whether it's stem cells or exosomes, and let's say you get it systemic or you get it locally injected, how do you stack it? Let's go into protocol. Let's start with this one. And I know there's probably multiple, but what is a protocol with regard to this specifically that you have heard of or experienced that really delivers excellent results?
It's a great question. So essentially, the ones that we started with PRP, and it came out of the CrossFit community because they were having a lot of overuse injuries for patellar tendonitis, and those guys really just wreck their bodies constantly. The professional guys workouts are intense, long, and then also 3 times a day, and the amount of work is just crazy. But what we've seen from that was they had things like patellar tendonitis, and there was a couple of papers that we had pulled up from a couple of different labs that are good labs. And so we said, hey guys, we're seeing that PRP is going to be effective with laser therapy for this. And even for people who'd had PRP and not seen results. So something like 30 or 35% of the cohort had not seen results out of that. That went up to really 99% of that cohort seeing it when you stack it with laser therapy. So we built them a protocol for this, which was 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening, starting directly after the PRP therapy. And essentially that's become our core protocol for joints and for soft tissue. So if you get myofascial injuries to the lower back and things like this, neck as well, these are really powerful protocols to be able to stack in and to essentially, they work on separate signaling pathways. And so they're completely synergistic. There's not really any overlap. You just add these, but it's 1 + 1 = 5 in this case because of the outcomes. They trigger things that actually benefit each other's signaling pathways in the body. It's a biochemistry discussion to go into about that, but the outcomes speak for themselves. It's just been amazing. And once we did that, we started looking at other protocols where, particularly with locally injected mesenchymal stem cells, there's a huge uptick for the outcomes for it. And so we started working on beta programs with a couple of our different clinicians as to using this in clinic and offering it as a take-home, either rental or purchase for their patients. And everyone's just raving about it. So those have been great ones. The other one we have is extracorporeal shockwave therapy. And there's a company out of their US distribution out of Atlanta called Softwave. And they have an amazing device.
I don't know much about this anymore. I don't know much about this at all. So this is new to me, Forrest. Can you explain what it is?
Sure. It's ultrasound. So they're using sound waves in almost kind of an impact way internally to your tissues. And you use this to stimulate that soft tissue. What they use it for a number of different things. And people are actually doing different adaptations of this for skin and anti-aging protocols as well. But it started off around knees. Pardon?
That be the soft wave?
That's right.
I have heard about that. I haven't tried it yet, but okay. Yes.
It's super effective. And again, it's the same thing. It's also triggering pathways that are not the same as the laser therapy. And so it stacks and you get this great 1 + 1 = 5 outcome from treating those. And so we worked with one of the guys who actually helped Softwave develop a lot of their protocols for actually using this for joints. And one of the things he's done is with knee pain, you can do the Softwave, but you can also distract the joint a little bit to open it up so that you can actually get the lasers in more effectively. And his patients he is crushing it from a clinical standpoint. They just see amazing results. And so everybody's back to see them all the time. And it's just been awesome working with Dr. Mike Lynch out of Colorado. Was great to work with on this. But that's what we do. When there's any way to either stack this as a habit to make sure that somebody's doing it on a daily basis. So I do mine with my morning coffee and emails, because there's not a day that I don't get coffee and emails. And because we do a lot of coaching about these type of things to make sure that people are in the programs as long as possible. But what we've found is that oftentimes people try to put these together with habit stacking, but for aspirational habits. Hey, should I build this in with my meditation? Okay, how many times have you meditated in the last 2 weeks? Once? Okay, don't do that. Build it in with your Netflix. It's okay. If you're doing Netflix every day for the last 2 weeks, that's the one your pragmatic habits, not your aspirational ones. Yeah, that's just one note on building habits around it if people are using them.
Really important note too, Fabric. And so let's talk about TikTok. TikToking, great. Stack it with that. But so let's talk about protocols specifically. You've mentioned lower back and knee, and let's say you use the Move Plus, and let's say you just tweak your knee. What is a protocol you'd recommend with the device?
So the first thing is make sure that when you're applying it, you bend the knee to the 90-degree angle. And then there's 2 small soft pockets to the either side of your kneecap or your patella. That's where you want, essentially on the back end behind your knee, you put the horizontal one and then put 2 vertical ones over those soft spots. When you bend the knee like that, it gives you direct access into that synovial fluid. And what we found from our interactions and follow-up surveys is we have about an 85% hit rate if we don't coach people through this. And that 15%, 14% of them are keeping their knee straight. So if you bend the knee and you target it into the internal tissue, you really 99+% hit rate for clearing up what's needed there. The kind of less than 1% is when it's really almost beyond bone on bone. And there's not really anything we can do about the mechanical friction points of that once you get to bone on bone. As long as you have some cartilage left, there's going to be a really positive impact from that. So that's the knee. I'd also love to share with you, if it's okay, one of the ones that I've found most exciting from a protocol standpoint that I'd love it if you're up for it.
And real quick with the knee. So how often would that be twice a day until the problem subsides? Or if you have a specific diagnosis, would it be a few weeks, just to get an idea?
Sure. Once a day minimum, 15 minutes. If you can do it twice a day, it adds about 20% into the recovery. So it's not doubling your outcomes. And so one of the things that we see people do occasionally is I got to do it 2 or 3 times a day or I'm not getting it done. And then they fall off of their maintenance of the actual program because it gets more annoying or more inconvenient for them. At the very least, just find something to stack it with, like your coffee or your Netflix or whatever. Get the once a day in. If you have another chance to do one more per day, you will see some uptick to it, but that's not going to be the one that really moves the needle. And from an expectation standpoint, we try to be very upfront and transparent for what people should expect out of this. For knees, 2 to 3 weeks, you see really powerful impacts. There's a bit of a spectrum on this. We have to have tissue to interact with the light to be able to have the impacts we should. So when we see things like osteoarthritis of the hands, it actually takes more like 5 to 6, and even we've seen a couple of users take 7 weeks to see the results. So we get some questions and, hey, what's happening? My hands aren't getting better. And so we just don't have the amount of tissue we need to interact with there to make that any faster. So the range, I would say on the other end of the range is things like edema, ankle sprains, high ankle sprains and things like this actually react even faster. And so that's down to days. And I also find the same thing for lower back sprains and things like this.
Excellent. And you wanted to share something else you were really excited about before.
Yeah, I am. I'm pumped. It's a part of it's just being in a good mood because of this protocol. We started a test with a Japanese lab about a year ago, and they had developed a protocol that they call the Proximal Priority Therapy, which essentially their idea for this was what they call testing abscopal or remote photobiomodulation, which means treating one area of the body and seeing results elsewhere. And there's a couple of areas of the body that have been treated like this, but their working theory for this was we interact with blood very effectively. We have these 2 big blood vessels in our neck. Let's see what this does for cardiovascular tissue and then systemic inflammation. And essentially, my protocol for this that I do every morning after my knee and back is 2 vertical modules over the largest blood vessels in your body, 15 minutes. And then I pull the modules as tight as I can together, and I put them about 1 inch below my navel on my lower abdomen. And what this does, and again, from an expectation setting standpoint, we see that the increase in neurotransmitters, both in the gut and brain, are impacted. So you see things like, BDNF, so brain-derived neurotrophic factor, serotonin, dopamine. And it took me just, and again, this is grain of salt that it's N of 1. It's a little bit different. This is in line with the medical research, but just to give my own kind of anecdotal version of this, it took me about 12 to 14 days. But after 12 to 14 days, mood up, energy up, brain fog down, like you just feel more cognitively alert and aware. And it just feels great. Like you just feel like I don't miss a day of it. I haven't missed a day of it in a year now, whether I'm traveling or not, because it was just felt so good. And you notice it when you don't do it. So the kind of neurological piece. And then the other interesting piece for this is the immune and autoimmune impacts. So I haven't been sick in a year. I got food poisoning at some point, but I don't think that really counts. But I got 2 kids, 9 and 5, and they bring in colds from school all the time. So I probably once or twice a season, I'd get a small cold or something like this. Nothing. And again, really in line with the medical research. I'm happy to send through more of that data for you. Because if I was hearing that, I'd be skeptical.
Oh, that is fascinating. And so I will add that to my protocol. So literally just 15 minutes a day, once here, right here at your neck, and then 1 inch below your navel. That's incredible, Forrest. Yeah, I got to get on that, and I will share with you as soon as I...
Please, send me through your notes. I'd love to hear it. One thing is we're a no ego company. Critical or negative input actually helps us more than positive input. So it allows us to modulate things or modify things in an effective way. Just as a general kind of note, really love getting critical feedback as well. So if you have anything, it's super open.
Amazing. And that's also what's needed. And that also shows that either you and your peers started out very healthily, or you've done a lot of self-work. Because when we get triggered by criticism, it just means we still have something stuck from childhood in us. It actually keeps us from growing. So complete side note. But
that's exactly right, though. But you also have to find somehow having that approach is magnetically brought in people who have a very similar approach, and it just becomes a community of it, and it makes it so much easier.
Yes. That again also resonates with me so much. It's learning, growing is fantastic. And we learn and grow, especially by the data we get when stuff doesn't work, not only what works. With regard to interesting effects, like you just described by the protocol of the neck 1 inch below your navel and how it has affected you, your team has also been exploring transcranial applications. Can you give us a glimpse into that? And also what may this type of therapy offer when it comes to neurological health?
So you can use the current device for it. One of the things we're also doing is, and actually use this quite frequently for brain, the impacts on microvasculature in your brain are fantastic. And there's been downstream, and the data is still soft. We don't really make claims about it or anything, but there's been really strong linkages between microvascular performance in your brain and things like dementia and Alzheimer's. And so we're getting devices out for as many people as we can to help them protect their brain tissue and that blood delivery systems in their brain. But we also have a new product. I'll just show you hard to see a little bit, but there's like an OLED screen there. It's a magnetic puck that you put a cap on, and then you can just put these around your head. And different pathologies, you want to target different parts of the brain. And we have an app that's coming out with it this summer as well. That's going to be super interesting. But these same modules will go around and target your gut as well. And it's 4 different wavelengths of lasers. We actually found that with internal tissue, so for dosing soft tissue, we didn't have to have the longer wavelength near infrared. We have a deep red and we have 1 near infrared wavelength. For these, because it's deeper tissue, and if you're like me, you got a very thick skull in between, you penetrate a little bit more effectively. And so those are essentially, we've added in 940 and 1064, which over the last 3 to 5 years of research in this space have been really shown to make a big impact for this kind of internal tissue. Brain impacts microvascular, again, neurotransmitters, and there's a good amount of research I'll send you through on that as well. But when you pair it with the gut treatment as well, it's completely synergistic. And it's actually led us down a different path as well for, as we were testing out these devices, when you're testing it on the gut, you're expecting some changes in the brain. And about low 80% of our users were getting those kind of neurological and chemical changes in the brain, but there was like almost 20%, so 18%, something like this, that weren't getting this. And so we want to know, like, we want all of our users to get the results that we're targeting with the treatment. But as we peeled back the onion on the data, basically all of these users were in fight or flight state. And the connection between their gut and brain, like that highway was essentially just jammed up with traffic. And so to get the result that you want out of this, we had to get them out of that. And so we started down a new development path with vagus nerve stimulation that actually is amazing as well. So we're releasing a new product later this year with vagus nerve stimulation to be able to really unblock that highway between the gut and brain and make sure that people are getting the best outcomes they can.
I know so many people who could benefit from that, especially people who are dealing with PTSD or CPTSD, who basically their lives have been for years or decades being in fight or flight mode and nothing has helped. So when will that product come out?
September. It may slide to October, usually with the supply chain and things. There's some kind of slide on it, but our plan for launch on that is September. It also has a sensor base in there. Essentially, the first version will be plethysmography, which allows us to track the impacts we're having on people's HRV and recovery because they're getting out of that fight or flight state. But the second version actually has an EEG. EEG, if you use EEG in your ear, you can actually map back to the temporal lobe of the brain, which is a really good measure we found from our early testing on this for flagging both people who are like, are you in fight or flight? Are you having this autonomic distress issue? And then also for the dosing that we use for the transcutaneous stimulation, electrical stimulation for this vagus nerve, we can also modulate how we treat them. So they're just not, sometimes some people really need a stronger shock, but a lot of people don't. You need what you need. And this gives us a way to put a feedback loop on that so that we're able to measure and really make sure that we're held accountable for delivering what we should be delivering from that stimulation.
Excellent, Forrest. And the smaller device, what you call the puck, so that will be out this summer together with an app?
It's going to be out, I think we're going to start delivering these July, August, and it's the Heal Plus. It started as a gut-only product, but because we've designed it, it's a bit of a technical wormhole to go down, or a rabbit hole. But yeah, it was designed really effectively to be able to provide a high level of dosing resolution. And so being able to change that, we can actually dose the brain extremely effectively and the gut extremely effectively. And yeah, there's so many people, like you said, having these issues of anxiety and PTSD, depression and sleep issues. And, we're really looking forward to getting this one out to market because it's so in line with the mission of changing people's quality of life. Your brain is just a huge leverage point for that. So yeah, just pumped about it.
That's incredible. I'm excited for that too. I'll be watching for that. Please keep me posted. God,
Absolutely.
I probably have a dozen people that come to mind right now, like they need to get it. But I would like to go a little bit deeper now into the vibrational side of light. You have spoken of light not just as a tool, but I think, if I'm correct, if my research is correct, you've also spoken about it as a frequency. How do you, Forrest, understand the intelligence of light?
It's a great question. And I think I'm probably not the most qualified one to speak to this. Our head of research is a photonics guy, and bioluminescence and a number of these different things that we see out of humans actually generating light. You generate infrared light at a higher scale, but this bioluminescence is crazy. And it's actually something that a number of different teams from a research standpoint are looking into as a metric, like how much light are you generating? And it's still early days from the medical research around it, but it's super exciting because it's something that no one's really gotten their arms around yet. It's still an open gray area from an adoption and implementation standpoint.
Mm-hmm. And what do you imagine for us for Kineon and wearable light technology, say in the next 5 years?
Awesome question. Sensors. So optical sensors are advancing incredibly quickly from a hardware standpoint. We spend a lot of time in how do we customize this laser? How do we customize this sensor? But the technology that's coming in really over the last 5 years, that's still at the laboratory level, we're working actively to reduce pricing and the footprint for these different things so that we can provide higher levels of measurement for the body. And one of the ones that we'll be working to launch next year is a sensor-based add-on for what we're doing for the brain treatment. And what that does is using near-infrared spectroscopy, so using light that kind of goes in and then bounces back out and that we interpret, and these really powerful new sensors, single photon avalanche diodes, that are wildly too expensive even 2 years ago to bring into a product. We're working on customizing those to get a picture, essentially a real-time 3D picture of how your brain uses energy, because we really believe that mitochondrial and metabolic function is the center of so many things, both from a performance standpoint, but also from a pathology side. So if you look at dementia and, again, depression, ADHD, autism, even things like fibromyalgia have a completely different. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Chronic fatigue syndrome.
Yes, yes.
Oh.
It's all of these have a different geometric profile for what part of your brain is either functioning or impaired from a metabolic standpoint. And being able to map that really shows us the same way that we're doing with the EEG. When we can interpret things and interpret signals that give us a feedback loop, we can dose more effectively on a personalized basis. And so that's the kind of holy grail that we're working towards. And it's just, again, it's just awesome. We're just so lucky to be alive at this time when these amazing things are happening from a technology standpoint, and it's just pulling together the right ones. And it's just magnetically coming out. It's almost like it was just kismet or fate to be building products like this at this time.
Beautiful, Forrest. And this has been such an illuminating journey, truly. And for those who are listening and who would like to learn more about Kineon, the Move Plus device, or laser therapy, your ongoing research, there's so many things you're putting out there. Where can they find you, or where can they find out more?
They can come check us out at kineon.io, Kineon.io. We also, our team have put together just to give everyone an understanding of this is an awesome tool, and it should be in your toolkit, but it's not the only thing you should be doing. If you have knee pain or if you have inflammation, most pathologies are not single variate, they're multivariate. And so we've made a quiz to help people understand where this fits into, how they can apply red light therapy to what pain points or recovery they would like to see. So on our site, and I'll send you the link so you can get it in the show notes, we have a quiz. So I would say if you have any questions as to how red light therapy could apply to what you have a problem with, we also use it as a way to set reasonable expectations for people where if they say, I've got hand osteoarthritis, we want to be upfront and say, hey, this can help you, but it's going to take a little time. Or if it's something that we can't help with, we try to be upfront and say, this is something that there's no medical research around. Feel free to try it, but this is probably something that has a little bit less support from the trial standpoint. So come check out our quiz on our site and try it out and see how red light therapy can apply to your life. And again, also feel free. One place that's really been useful for a lot of our users is we have a large 7,000 or 8,000 person Facebook group where people can come in and ask questions directly and see, hey, what was your experience with this? Or what did you try with that? And we use it as a way to keep our ear to the ground and ask questions about how we can improve the product and the experiences. But I think it's also really useful for people who want to know what this kind of technology can do for them. Don't listen to us. Like you don't necessarily have to. Look at the medical research and look at the people who are getting these great results from it and make your own decisions.
Excellent, Forrest. And I'll make sure we put all of that into the show notes. Truly, it has been such a pleasure, and I have a feeling to be continued.
Yes, I hope so. What a great discussion. Thank you so much for having me.
Superhumanize. Accelerated evolution.